Gaza. When you're young, there is no other choice but to be a revolutionary. Young people have exemplified this statement, especially now, and have continued to raise their voices and put their bodies on the line to not only bring more attention to what is occurring in Gaza, but to demand that our government and universities acknowledge the ongoing genocide and divest from Israeli institutions and war profiteers. We want to do our part as MAPA to platform these student voices and give them the opportunity to tell us their experiences, future plans, strategies going forward, and to also, most importantly, I think, counteract the notion that these demonstrations are dangerous, violent, and hateful. We are so fortunate to be joined by students from across Massachusetts who are a part of these powerful worldwide movements to end the indiscriminate destruction in Gaza. Today, we have representatives from Northeastern University, Harvard, Tufts, UMass Amherst, and Emerson. Glenn, if we can spotlight all of the students onto the screen for all the people to see, that would be amazing. Awesome, they're coming up. We have a few more coming. But really for this webinar, what we felt would be most effective is to have a student-on-student conversation. If many of you probably don't know me, but my name is Grace Sanford. I'm a current student at Northeastern University and currently doing co-op with Massachusetts Peace Action. And we really wanted to ask the students questions and hear their voices and not have anyone else speak for them and really have a great discussion. So I really appreciate you all for being here today. I know everyone else in the audience appreciates it too. So if all of you want to introduce yourselves, if we want to start with UMass, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Ruya.
My name is Maysoon.
We're co-presidents of UMass SJP.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to Emerson.
Hi, I'm Rayanne, and I'm an organizer with Emerson SJP, and then there are two other folks that are also here.
Awesome, thank you. And Patricio and Victoria from Northeastern.
I'm Patricio. With Huskies for a Free Palestine at Northeastern.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm with Huskies for a Free Palestine at Northeastern.
Awesome. And Harvard University.
Hi, y'all. I'm Ishan. I'm an organizer with the Palestine Solidarity Committee.
Thank you. And Tufts.
Hi, it's so lovely to be here. My name is Dahlia, and I'm a member of Tufts SJP, and my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for being here. I think we're just gonna jump right into it and get started with the discussion. My first question, I think I really wanted to kind of get at the start of your encampments. So I really wanted to ask you what motivated you and your organizations to join this student movement. We can really start with anyone if anyone wants to jump in.
Just to sort of kick it off, I think like the PSC here on Harvard's campus has been super active with pro-Palestine organizing since basically October, and even going back before that. And I think here, like a lot of our organizers have a sort of very keen sense of the history of the student movement more broadly, and especially like the connections between like some of the different struggles that we organize around and how they relate to Palestine. For example, a pretty core part of our team has been like a group called like the African and African American Resistance Organization, which is another student group here on campus. And the people who founded that and those organizers had a very keen understanding of like how like African American struggles were tied to Palestinian struggles. And I personally am like I do a lot of organizing work about like combating Hindu nationalism and obviously an understanding of like Hindu nationalism and Zionism and those relationships were super important. So I think like we're very much a coalition composed of people who understand like the intersectionality of Palestine along with a lot of other struggles around the world. And that brought all of us to like the same space since October. And this is like naturally a continuation of that.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I think what we're also trying to reiterate with these student movements is this isn't new. You know, some people are kind of saying this came out of the blue. This has been an ongoing conflict for, I'm sure all of you know better than I do, but years and years. Yeah. Would anyone else like to jump in? UMass, Ria,
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we've been organizing with SJP our entire time at UMass, which we're seniors now, so it's been a while. And it's safe to say that we were an organization, sorry about my cat, she loves the spotlight, but it's safe to say that we were an organization of 10 to 20 people on a good day for the past 3 years before October. And after October 7th, us and the group Dissenters on campus, which are a demilitarization group, kind of formed a coalition. And we had around 500, 600 people at our protests almost regularly whenever we would have a big one. And the encampments that we set up actually were not our first rodeo with the cops. Last semester, not sure if people are aware, but we deoccupied, if you will, the Whitmore administration building, where we sat in, 57 of us, 56 students and one staff member, sat in demanding that the Chancellor Reyes, meets with us and discusses our demands of divestment. He refused. He immediately called the cops on us, and 57 of us got arrested that night. And it was certainly interesting because we did this sit-in as, I mean, we took inspiration from the activists on our campus that preceded us. And the most recent one was the 2016 activists who sat in and occupied the Whitmore building for divestment from fossil fuels. And they were not arrested until a couple days or 3 or 4 days even of sitting in. Whereas we were immediately arrested. We were not even given a day. It's also important to note that their goals of divestment were met and ours weren't. We were also met with student sanctions on top of our arrests, which previous activists weren't. So off the bat, there was a complete differential treatment of us versus activists that came before us, which was not surprising to people who have been in this movement for a while, because progressive accept Palestine politics is a very real thing that has existed for forever. But yeah, and so naturally, when it was time to escalate again this semester, we were ready and we had new people ready to escalate. And I mean, out of the 57 who were arrested last semester, only 5 or 6 of them were rearrested. Everyone else was completely new. Around 130 new people got arrested. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I can maybe speak to a little bit of that. I wasn't one of those people, you know, last semester or year before who was kind of entrenched in the organizations, and I am one of those new people who was kind of coming in and trying to help and support the movement. So I appreciate all that you've done. It's really amazing. Sorry, someone raised their hand. Go for it. Emerson?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just gonna talk a little bit about like the choice to do an encampment specifically rather than a different type of escalation.
Yep.
I think, well, something particular about Emerson is the fact that like we're a city campus. So with all the like popular university sort of like reclamation of education and putting it back into the hands of the people, also having that follow through with reclamation of the land and like the area that they've gentrified, um, and trying to give it back to the people, because that was like something that I think that was really valuable about our encampment, was that we had people um that were able to, like, we were able to shelter unhoused people, give them supplies, like integrate back into the community rather than like isolating ourselves. And I think that was why it was so valuable to be able to do an encampment rather than like, um, I don't know, different types of escalations that would also have like police presence.
Yeah, thank you. I've read up on, Emerson's encampment, but I didn't realize that aspect of it. That's really amazing. Northeastern, obviously I have a connection. I go to Northeastern. What motivated your organization to join the student movement?
So I would say there are several things. First of all, our SJP in the past 5 years, 5 to 10 years, has gone on under a lot of sanctions and pushback from administration. So Huskies for a Free Palestine was formed unauthorized, unregistered on purpose because we wanted to protect those students that were affiliated with the university and still be able to do more direct actions as a community. And for us, what inspired us to join the movement was the sanctioning of SJP and them not being able to hold events. And more importantly, the fact that there are no universities left in Gaza, and the fact that our school specifically refused to issue a statement about what was happening, issued a statement saying they wouldn't divest because their money isn't political. But most importantly, as a group, we recognize the fact that, we all are complicit living in the imperial core, living in America with the genocide occurring of the Palestinian people, especially that our privileges as college students, as like petty bourgeoisie, are built on the impression of like neocolonialized people globally, internationally, even of the community of Roxbury and the communities of Oakland, California. So for us, it wasn't a why, but when of escalation, especially seeing that our administration was refusing to meet with us or listen to us.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. Oh yeah, Patricia, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can just tie it back into what was coming from our Emerson comrades, which is the imperative as a city university, as a city campus. I think our encampment only survived because we explicitly rejected the distinction between students and non-students, and therefore the border between something like a white supremacist institution, which Northeastern represents, and which I think all of our institutions represent, and the communities of Boston, communities like Roxbury, Black and Brown working class communities. And it's breaking that distinction and breaking those borders specifically, which are the root of the solidarity which we're trying to embody here, which is solidarity across borders, solidarity with the Palestinian resistance, solidarity for global liberation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, jump in, Ishan.
Yeah, I just to sort of echo what people said before, like for example, like at Harvard, our encampment is in a bit of a different like strategic situation because where we are is in like a place that's cut off from the outside world in a very real sense. And I think that's one of the things that we've had the most difficulty with, and that's one of the things we're trying to incorporate the most, is like breaking that boundary between like say the Harvard community or like the students who are in the encampment versus like the rest of Cambridge, the rest of Boston more broadly. Because I think all of us like at the camp like realize that our movement like lives or dies or succeeds or fails based on our ability to connect and build bonds with those outside the university. Like the university exists in a matrix of the outside world, and it's important for us to realize that the only way that we win is by recognizing that. So that's something that is probably our greatest challenge, but also like one of the things that's most important for us as organizers.
Yeah, thank you. I remember the first time I saw the gates closed at Harvard, because our office is right near there. And I unfortunately wasn't surprised, but I was still really sad and shocked that, schools, universities, administrations are so scared of students speaking out that they will literally close their gates. I know if Northeastern had gates, they would have done that as well. Thankfully, we don't. But yes, Dahlia, do you have anything to say as the representative from Tufts? What motivated you? What motivated your organization to join the student movement?
Yeah, of course. Speaking personally, I have a Palestinian background, a Lebanese background, but a grandmother who her family was Nakbad. So that's my personal inspiration. SJP, I think similar to what others were saying, it was kind of a matter of being forced into that position. At Tufts, there was a resolution passed a couple of years ago, actually, for Tufts police to stop being trained with IOF soldiers, to which the university did not meet that at all or even acknowledge it. And then similarly, back in March, there was an overwhelming support of a vote in our Tufts Senate that passed 3 resolutions to divest, have an apology from the president, and then stop all business with Israeli, like, local food companies, which was also ignored. So it was, yeah, kind of a matter of being forced into that position. What Ishan was saying that actually made me think, one thing I really liked about the encampment was, like, I've been thinking more about how like Palestine is, they call it like the human litmus test, like humanity's litmus test. And I think the encampment had a really special advantage of like teaching us how we are going to live in a future that does not accept genocide for anyone, but also it literally, like, the encampments can't continue unless people learn to be very giving, like learn to overcome the values that America and capitalism have kind of instilled in us, like, only looking out for yourself. It's just not possible to run an encampment and have those values at the same time. Community was a huge one. Intersectionality, keeping an open mind, all huge ones. And I really thought it was one of the most important aspects of my life, especially having Palestinian family, it just being such a safe place to go and share feelings.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I didn't spend too much time at Northeastern's encampment, maybe 5 or 6 hours altogether, but just the feeling of community and just how beautiful and peaceful it was, people reading poetry, having teach-ins, making artwork. It really does build a space of community. But keeping this discussion moving, we already kind of touched on why this particular strategy of encampments works and what it builds off of. So I really want to try to get at the administration's response. When you set up these encampments, what was your administration's initial response to it? How did they respond? Anyone can jump in. Yeah, go for it, Dylan.
Yeah, so as well as being an organizer for SJP at Emerson, I'm also one of the founders of the student union on campus. And I wanted to mention how the student union, we were founded in 2022. We're trying to get a contract for the student body, like a tenants union. And the school initially met us with very open arms. They were wanting to get us affiliated. They offered us $25,000 to do just that, which we turned down. And we continued to agitate. And once we got to pushing more expensive demands, they got a little rougher. They changed their demonstration policy a little bit. But as soon as SJP stepped onto campus, it was a completely new ball game. They started banning basically activism off of campus as a whole. They made it so we couldn't use, unaffiliated organizations couldn't use campus spaces, campus emails, campus Wi-Fi. We couldn't table on campus. We were charged for vandalism, for leafleting on campus. There was a whole load of just BS charges. And I believe there were almost 40 before our first arrest took place, which came as a response to these. That we were protesting in response to these very sanctions, and we were at our president's inauguration, standing on the sidewalk, and 13 students, 11 of which were Black and brown, were arrested for simply demonstrating on the sidewalk. So Emerson at this point has continued to they've expanded their demonstrations policy to ban demonstrations off of campus essentially entirely. And so we're experimenting with all sorts of different places we can go. Inside is banned, in front of anywhere outside is banned. Public sidewalk, we got arrested. There's an alleyway right next to or really is like the central kind of meeting spot of our campus. And so that is where our encampment took place. And I wanted to touch on real quick why we had the kind of response that we did, because at Emerson, we're such a small school, probably the smallest one that's being mentioned in these uprisings, and yet we had some of the most arrests and some of the most participation. And I think it's important to touch on how, because we were dead center in the middle of the city, we had to come up with a particularly strong and militant security strategy. And we had to really diligently train like our entire community on certain levels of this. And I think it's really important to emphasize that our more militant approach really is what galvanized the entire student body, because everybody felt that they could not leave their people there in danger unless, so everyone felt like we all had to stay together. And also, I think it's important to mention that our goal was not, public perception and looking good for the camera, but keeping our people safe, which I think is oftentimes where militancy comes into play. So I wanted to just kind of highlight, to answer your question, the admin's response started, with the student union. They were trying to be super nice and trying to co-opt everything. But as soon as it became about the liberation of the Palestinian people, activism was fully criminalized on campus. And after our encampment, they've also banned demonstrations from the alley, leaving not one safe place to demonstrate on campus.
Wow. Dylan, can I just ask, did the university, or I should say college, Emerson College, did they give any reasoning for banning demonstrations on and off campus?
Y'all might need to help me out, my Emerson friends. I don't think they gave a reason, but they sent an email the morning after 118 students were arrested and countless more were brutalized. They sent us an email, very, very short, just saying, and they put signs all over the alleyway, every 5 feet, saying no loitering, no demonstrating, no public camping.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that it said was that we need to be safe when we're all sharing our differing opinions with each other. And it also did say at the end that if that's not possible, then the use of force may be needed.
And then also a note on the alley specifically. There have been demonstrations in the past in Emerson's history with Ebony, our Black student organization, and other organizations, advocacy organizations, using that specific space to protest, to make sure they're heard. Those have all happened in the past. And like Dylan was saying, just a very different response.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Victoria.
Touching back on the amazing points Dylan, all the Emerson folks brought up about safety specifically, I guess this is something I want folks in the audience to think about too. I think traditionally the way we're raised and educated in America is safeties with police and safeties with authority figures. But these encampments, as students, as young adults, showed us that we keep us safe. That's maybe a chant you've heard or seen on social media or seen in the news. And it stands trite and true, honestly, because the people bringing the cops, the people brutalizing students, our administration, our police officers, our BPD, our state troopers, people we're funding with our tax dollars. And something that Northeastern that kind of worked for us to hold off the administration from their response was eyes and bodies. So having people there that were community members, that were students, that were non-students, because one thing about Northeastern, they hate bad press. Most universities do too. And so having news people like Al Jazeera and other news organizations coming with cameras and coming with reporters, having community members just standing there. The first time students were kettled at Northeastern actually scared the cops away and they left because we outnumbered them and we were not engaging in violence. They were the ones that came with batons and zip ties and guns and tasers. And so for my audience, all of our audience members here, just think about safety and think about how students are modeling new ways of community and to be safe with one another. Because administrations don't like community, they don't like eyes, they don't like press. And that's ways we can combat that kind of oppression and like resistance, or not resistance, but repression.
Yeah, go ahead, Patricio.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to highlight the argument of safety that these camps have created an unsafe environment, which almost all the administrations, I think, have used to justify the usage of pretty extreme forms of violence. And just the dissonance there coming from the West, which I think is a pretty common pattern, which upholds its safety always with a pretty extreme amount of violence. And I think we see this in the genocidal occupation of Palestine, where some essence, some ideal of safety has to be maintained with a brutal amount of violence against the Palestinian people. And this discourse is always repeated. And we see it at Northeastern, where NUPD, campus police who are armed, who have numerous documented instances of utilizing excessive force against the communities of Boston, are justified through this narrative of safety over and over again, of safety. And I think, as all of my comrades have said and have experienced, all of these camps kind of idealized and embodied real safety, which was community, which was grassroots, and it looked and felt like resistance and like liberation. And it was not anything close to police force. It was exactly the opposite of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Ishan.
Yeah, I think one other thing that I wanted to talk about, like based on our experience here at Harvard, is like the weaponization of disciplinary policy, or the weaponization of like sort of facially neutral policy more broadly. Like I'm gonna violate the confidentiality rules of my disciplinary case, so no one tell Harvard administration, please. But one of the things that they're currently charging us with is this idea of like disrupting the normal like process of the university, or disrupting the normal operations of the university. And one other thing, sort of to build off of like that safety point, is they actually hit us with endangering our own safety for sleeping outside, which I thought was like a very interesting charge. And I'm thinking about like this idea of like these sort of subjective rules being almost sort of misinterpreted in order to create this Palestine exception for free speech, because like nothing that we have done so far has really been like beyond the pale of like the history of previous student protest at Harvard. Like we're not the first to build an encampment in Harvard Yard. That was done like as part of like the struggle to divest from apartheid South Africa. And we're not the first to occupy a building or occupy a space. That's been done many times throughout Harvard's history. So I think like one thing I would encourage people to think about is this idea of like weaponizing policy intended for other purposes towards like the aims of chilling student protest.
100%. Yeah, go ahead, Dahlia.
I also wanted to add to that with the disciplinary action, like such as suspension over, I don't know, something like even getting arrested. in some cases, like at Tufts, suspensions basically means that all the credits you take for a semester don't count anymore, which for some people means not even getting to go to Tufts anymore because they can't afford to pay another year. So there's also a layer of like, you know, classism and literally holding someone's education above their head and saying you can't get it if you do this. Which is a huge injustice and honestly even worse than getting arrested for certain people. I also wanted to add something interesting about the Tufts encampment specifically. I think or what it highlighted for me is that I think disruption is a huge part of it. Like the encampment itself, it was not enough. Like, for example, we started for 2 weeks in mid-April, and it didn't really no headlines. No, I don't even think the Tufts administration mentioned it, because it wasn't really disrupting. I think every encampment needs a crux or something they can use it as a negotiating tool. I know for a lot of places that's commencement. As we got closer to commencement, that's kind of what ours was. But it's about not letting things go on as business as usual. And it's also interesting to me how much comfortability for these people is. Like, they will take such offense. Like, the fact that commencement couldn't happen on that specific lawn was it was like the end of the world for some people. They were like, well, I wasn't against Palestine, but now that you're going to interfere with my commencement, like that's something that was on side shot. Like, that's how much comfortability is worth to these people. And that's what we really need to disrupt, because that's what's going to create change.
Yeah, go ahead, Ria.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make this not last a million hours, but I've been writing my thoughts because we had 2 encampments at UMass. So we had one 10 days ago-ish, maybe 2 weeks ago today. And the plan was to stay as long as we could. And there was a plan for people to get arrested and stay. What happened was that legal support fell through at one point during the night. So people did stay the night. Legal support fell through. So in the morning, when the last warning was given, people decided to take down the tents because the goal isn't to get arrested, first of all. The goal is to protect the encampment and to keep fighting for Palestine. And I feel like media has twisted it to be that, these children, these protesters just want to get arrested. And that's never the goal, specifically, and especially if there is no legal support. So we took it down and we took a week to mobilize more people. And a lot of people were feeling upset.
I'd like to add, we're a state university, so we built that encampment also with the assumption that the rules that apply to the Massachusetts state law would apply to us, but obviously that was like a foolish thought, because UMass actually is creating new steps every step of the way they're creating new rules basically to silence us.
Yeah, so what's really funny going off of that is we were actually told to take down the encampment on our public university because we were violating the land use policy, which is hilarious because we are a public university for one, and we are on unceded indigenous land. So random administrators telling us we are violating a land use policy is ridiculous in so many different ways. Anyway, we took it down. We came back last week. And safe to say, we mobilized hundreds and hundreds of more people. Many people were upset that we had taken down the encampments, and a lot of new people joined. And because we are a public university, we have the unique situation where a lot of community members were able to join our encampments. We had a lot of support from outside groups, which was extremely lovely. And this time we also decided to go for a more militant approach because we decided if we're doing this, we're going to do this. So we had a group of people who built barricades, which all the pictures are on UMass SJP's Instagram, fully built the barricades, put the tents in it. And we had tiers of red, so tiers of people who would get arrested, the people who would be inside the barricades and resisting the cops, and the people who would protect it on the outside. And that really scared the administration, and they kept coming and giving us warnings as they did last time, but they realized this time that we had 500 to 600 people that were not leaving. So they did grant us a meeting, and I was part of that meeting. We had a negotiation team of 2 undergrads, an undergrad and a faculty member, and 5 or 6 administrators. And the second we stepped foot in that building, the opening words of Chancellor Reyes were, as I told him, a closing statement. He started this meeting, which he told us he would come to talk to us, by saying, I cannot do anything for you guys. I cannot meet any of these demands. I cannot disclose. I cannot divest. I can't do anything. And it was an awful meeting. And another thing is that before we agreed to this meeting, one of our demands, before even sitting at a meeting table or a negotiation table with the chancellor, was you will not send cops to the encampment until at least we are done with this meeting. Otherwise, we're not meeting with you. It's not a meeting with good faith if cops are waiting to arrest students as we are meeting with you. And we got note during the meeting that cops had arrived already in their paddy wagons and were waiting, basically, which was, I mean, clearly it was a meeting of bad faith. He lied to us. And we couldn't come to any single agreement, which is not unexpected. But before leaving, he kept saying that my university, in his words, my university, not ours, will not turn into what happened at UCLA. He was very scared of it turning into what happened at UCLA, which was extremely violent. And he said that the cops would be deployed to keep us safe and to make sure that that wouldn't happen, which was extremely funny because it was a completely peaceful encampment. Even with the barricades, it was completely peaceful until the cops showed up, and the cops in riot gear, and the Stadies, and the emergency response team, which are some of the most vicious, trained by IOF forces that could be there. And they were all there in their riot gear with their rubber bullets and their pepper spray and what have you. And it got, as you would expect, extremely violent because of these cops that our chancellor sent to protect us. And just some highlights quickly that happened to us because of these cops that were released on us is that, first of all, the people who we thought would be most at risk, or who you would think would be most at risk, which are the people resisting the cops in the barricade, were actually the safest. The cops were attacking random people on the outskirts, people who were not doing anything, people who were filming. They arrested medics. They broke someone's tibia. They threatened DCF, child services, on an Arab mom and her son if she did not leave, because they were holding the line to protect the encampment. It was the most violent, most brutal. I mean, it turned into a war zone, because what happened is, I think what the chancellor thought is that he would send his 10 little UMPD cops and everyone would get scared and run away. And the opposite happened. People became angry. 500, 600 people decided to join the people holding the line. People who weren't even trying to get arrested decided to protect the encampment. Everyone locked arms, like hundreds of people, to the point where we kettled the cops for 2 to 3 hours until they called the state police and until we were extremely outnumbered by the most violence I've seen in my life. But I think that what is worth noting is that we did not do this to get arrested. we did not have to be arrested. No one had to be arrested, specifically in our case as a public university. This happened because the chancellor wanted it to happen. And I mean, we didn't want to we weren't trying to put people at risk. I mean, whenever we do this, and we learned a lot from last semester's action where 57 got arrested, we have a whole legal team. We have a jail support team. Not a single person goes unaccounted for, including so many community members who decided to get arrested for holding the line with us. Every single person we took care of, we had legal support, we prepared for it. And I think that this is a narrative that gets really ignored by the media, is that these are really thought out, and these are students who have thought out this action that they are doing for Palestine, not to get arrested. And we didn't have to get arrested. There was no need for these. None of these encampments need to lead to students getting arrested. And all of these encampments have turned violent because of the police. And we, like someone earlier said, really, really, I think, exemplified how we keep us safe and how the police did not keep anyone safe. They're the ones who employ all the violence. Student protesters do not. Encampments do not. We are sitting on public land and getting, I mean, brutalized for it. And yeah, I mean, it was so ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Raylan.
Yeah, going like off of that, when we talk about who keeps us safe, it's, yes, we're talking about like against police, police brutality 100%. We're also talking about within the actual like encampments themselves. We're the ones providing the food. We're the ones providing the water, bathroom access. We're the ones providing blankets, shelter. The community members are, like we are the ones physically keeping us safe in every single like aspect of it. And so it shouldn't be surprised that we would also keep us safe in front of brutal police. And that's something that like they talk about. Like I think Victoria, you were saying this about how like, the police, this concept of safety, with the police and with administration, that's what, we're taught that they're supposed to do when, we're keeping us safe not against, but well, yeah, against them, basically. And so yeah, I think, just touching on that is so important, how like the ways that we've shown up for each other, even like across schools, how we would show up for each other's encampments, making sure that we keep us safe in the entire like aspect of it in every single way. And we also at Emerson had a similar negotiation meeting where we had 2 students from SJP and 2 faculty and staff to go into a meeting with the president of Emerson. And in this meeting, he refused to talk about Palestine, and he explicitly said that he would not meet these demands. And he asked, like, if I can't meet these demands, then, what are you going to do? And we're like, well, we're going to stay until you meet them. And throughout the entire meeting, he, talked about the possibility of, police or disciplinary action or, anything that comes, any sort of consequence. And through that, we knew, and we made sure that people in our encampment knew as well. And we knew about the threat of arrest because we also had experienced it before, and we're not trying to get arrested. Like Ruya. Okay, Ruya was saying, we're not trying to get arrested. That will never be our goal, to be, arrested. And at the end of the day, we're here for Palestine. We'll continue to speak up for Palestine. We'll do whatever it takes. And, like, if we're going to be here speaking up for Palestine, if arrest or disciplinary action is a consequence, we'll find a way around it either, or we understand that whatever consequence we face will never amount to the consequence that Palestinians are facing in Gaza, that they're facing in the West Bank in 48. So we know that everything we're doing today, we're doing for that reason, and we stand strong in that reason, regardless of any consequence that could be possible, whether it's, arrest or suspension or, getting beat up by the police. Like, we keep going, we'll get up, we'll fight back. We're here for each other. We will make sure that if one person needs to step down, someone will step in. Everyone will be supported and everyone will be able to continue the fight, because that's what we're here for Palestine.
Amazing. I mean, all of you brought up so many good points. I think I've lost 5 of them that I was gonna say, but I think all of you echoed that these encampments and these demonstrations are peaceful. and they turn violent when police, whether it be campus police, whether it be state police, whether it be city police, Boston PD, it gets violent when they show up. And I've seen so many, videos and statements from, our representatives, federal representatives, Biden, and so many of the mainstream media saying how violent these are. And it's just so far from the truth. So this is really, I think, the narrative with this webinar that we're trying to get out there. And also, I'm sure all of you kind of share this thought with me, but when applying to Northeastern, I was really excited about it. I was like, wow, they really promote student leadership and activism and empowerment, and they seem so progressive. But when their students really embody those values, they shut us down. And that's what all of these universities are doing. And it's so angering and it's so disheartening. Victoria, did you have something to say? I saw your hand.
It was like a quick few things to say when we're taking notes, but this is in regards to a few things comrades brought up. I want to start with the word peaceful. We've heard that a lot. Well, first of all, what I want to talk about is narrative, actually, narrative of administration and narrative in the media specifically in regards to the encampment and Palestine. But with narrative, we hear the word peaceful a lot, and we think that peaceful is good, and if it's peaceful, it should be allowed. But in my personal belief, and I think my other comrades here, all those who are oppressed have a right to arm resistance and have a right to resistance at any means necessary. Obviously, what we experience as students here is a fraction of what's actually happening in Palestine, in the Congo, in Sudan, and all these other places in oppressed lands. But I think this narrative is very important to deconstruct of things need to be peaceful and perfect and clean to be allowed or to be sanctioned, so to say. Especially when it comes to Palestinian resistance, people are like, oh, well, look what they did on October 7th. The kids are throwing rocks, XYZ. When it comes to scale and perspective, the arms and the resistance of the Palestinian people is smaller than the arms and the funding, the military of the IOF and of Israel. And the same thing, not exactly, can be applied to the student encampments here, where students without guns and without tasers, all we have is barricades and chairs and tents, yet the response is guns and batons and CERT and stadies and so much more that's extreme. And I think speaking to narrative, importantly, is how these universities are twisting it in the same way the media does of what's happening in Palestine, in the same way the media twists it to cater to Israel and its agenda and its apartheid. Specifically at Northeastern, for those who are aware, on the second day of the encampment, they issued a statement saying essentially why they needed to take down the encampment. It was because we had professional hired organizers. I'm not paid. And that there was a promotion of anti-Semitic sentiments. And if those who follow less mainstream media saw actually at our encampment on the second night, there were counter-protesters, Zionist counter-protesters holding Israeli flags who were trying to get students to chant things like kill the blank. Because at encampments, something we do is we have people repeat back chants to each other. So an organizer was trying to repeat back a chant of telling people what to do, and in the pause in between, the counter-protester said that very disgusting slur. And it was actually caught on video. But Northeastern, in response to that, said, we basically don't care who said it, it's not allowed. Instead of condemning and punishing those students that said that, they took down and brutalized the students holding the peaceful encampment. So I think narrative is really, really important when it comes to dissecting what's happening here, what's happening abroad, and what's happening in our everyday communities, especially for those in the audience who may be engaged in different ways, making sure that the information you're receiving is not just from the mainstream and not just believed at face value, but going deeper than that. Patricio.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just follow up on that and kind of the brutal myth of peace and the danger of that discourse. We can see in Palestine where it's the days before October 7th are depicted as if they were some kind of peace, when the reality is that there has been no peace in occupied Palestine since 1948, which will be 76 years this coming Wednesday, because every minute of the occupation is brutally violent. It's checkpoints, it's armed guards, it's soldiers, it's prisons. And I think, once again, we can see a smaller version of that right here in our American cities, because this is another white supremacist settler colonial entity. And we can see that because every minute of the existence of a white supremacist institution like Northeastern is violent. That is just something that we can't see on the surface. But every minute, every minute of this institution requires racial profiling of the surrounding communities. It requires an armed police force like the Northeastern University Police Department. It requires a considerable amount of violence to be maintained, to create these borders, to create this elitist institution for privileged bodies like ours. And I think rejecting that violence will always be depicted as a violence wrongly, when in reality, that is the path to liberation. That is the only moral path that we could take.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Ruya.
Really quick, but just to add on to everything that was being said, I completely agree with all the nuance behind the word peaceful. And I also wanted to point out that if it were to be that students decided to get violent, in which students decided to ruin property, like at Cal Poly or at Columbia, it still would not mean that this response of state police and the emergency response team and UMPD and whoever it is, it still doesn't give them a right, because the reason these policing institutions exist is to protect property. It's not to protect people. And I think that's exactly what we are seeing. They are caring about this supposed property that's being ruined, which a lot of the time it's not even. But even if it is, they're there breaking bones and drawing blood for property when this property is being ruined because we are protesting against over 35,000 people who have been murdered with our tax dollars by our institutions who have these ties, these direct ties to Israel in so many different ways. And that's completely being ignored. And the way the media is painting it is just all about these protests and these encampments, and not about Palestine at all, and not about the reason for these encampments. I mean, so many media outlets are refusing to say the word Palestine when covering this. And they're still talking about anti-Semitism, which is just a red herring at this point. I mean, we just exist and we're called anti-Semites. I mean, there's no even arguing with it anymore. And that's just what this is. This is all a way to take away from what is actually happening. And all this coverage is a way to get the media to stop talking about this genocide and to steer the conversation. And I think that what it's done is the exact opposite. I think that it's mobilized way more students. It's mobilized more community members. And I mean, so many people who were deciding to look away cannot look away when you have an encampment. They cannot look away when their peers are being brutalized by the cops. It did the exact opposite. And specifically speaking for UMass, I mean, I have never seen so many people at one of our rallies at all. At one point, all the people that we recognized, the main organizers, everyone was arrested or gone. And I went to the encampment zone just to see who was left. And there was a group of around 100 to 200 students mobilized who I've never seen at any of our protests in our life. Point being that what they are doing to silence the movement and the students is only radicalizing more people, and it's only making the movement more strong. And even if this movement was violent, it still does not necessitate cop violence.
I want to add something to that. That like basically to what you were saying, people that have never cared about Palestine, people that don't feel as though they should be compelled to care because it doesn't affect them, those people, I think we should actually thank the response from the university and from police, because the mask is falling. I mean, like, it's everyone is just it's undeniable that we're just living under a fascism essentially, and people are starting to care, and we're starting to cater to an audience that we never have before, because now we have suddenly frat brothers who are really concerned about their First Amendment rights, and about freedom of speech being taken away from them. And I think that adds a really valuable element that, you know, protesters, students, kids are being charged with these ridiculous accusations and these ridiculous crimes for expressing what America's all about, free speech, for doing what this whole country claims to be built on, freedom. And so yeah, I think we actually have them to thank for that, for, you know, the mask just falling. We can't lie to ourselves anymore. We can't lie to ourselves about living under democracy. This isn't democracy. And I'm grateful that people are starting to care for that reason.
Yeah. I have so many. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I see your hand.
Okay, yeah, just really quickly, like sort of in line with that, I think that watching people like build consciousness, start to become radicalized has been one of the most like, I don't know, it's been so great to see that happen, but it's also been like one of the most frustrating parts to recognize that people had to watch like someone that they've been in a classroom with be brutalized for them to like even start paying attention rather than like actually witnessing genocide. And I think, oh my goodness, I had something else, but it completely slipped my mind. Sorry.
No worries. If it comes to you, I'll see your hand. I have so many more questions for you. It is already 8 o'clock, so I am gonna ask you one more. Just to wrap it up, where do things stand now? What some of you I think touched on this, but what is your administration's response now? Do you have any next steps? I know maybe you can't get into that last part, but where do things stand, really? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think like first and foremost, we're gonna keep doing everything we're doing, and we're only gonna get louder and we're only gonna get stronger as the movement continues, as we, talk more, as, even though like, our school, Emerson, our classes, our semester ended already, but we're gonna keep up, making sure that people are educated. We'll be having inshallah like some teach-ins like over the course of the summer, and also like making sure that everything we're doing is accessible to people wherever they are. So, if teachings can be virtual, we'll try and do it that way. And then also ensuring that people in our SJP and in our campus community, that they can also get involved wherever they are. If you're in DC, you can get involved with the DMV SJP and making sure that people are actively supporting the Palestine organizations with them. And not only that, but the local and collective organizations near them too, whether that's for accessibility, justice, and for like queer rights, and just really making sure that we're supporting every single person that we can, because at the end of the day, who keeps us safe? We do, in every single way. And we can only make like Palestinian liberation is a collective liberation movement where it's for every Palestine, the topic of Palestine is for everyone. And so we need to make sure that, we're giving back to our communities in every way we can, while also giving back to Palestine as well. And so, making sure that people are getting involved in the communities local to them. And, like we said, even though they're going to send out disciplinary hearings that we can expect to come out next year, within the next semester, as they ramp up demonstration policies, even though they've arrested us, even though they've, and everything they've done to try and silence us, they can do whatever they want. We're going to keep going. Nothing they can do can stop us. And, that's that.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
That was wonderful, Ryan. Thank you. But just to speak to some of the other next steps that we're planning at Emerson, for the union side of things, we have very robust unions on campus, but they have not taken a stance on Palestine. And higher education unions are very weak, and they know it, and they are consistently trying to build power locally, like wall-to-wall campus unions, so they can actually get real representation, unlike their giant locals that hardly represent faculty and staff oftentimes. So a big goal is to show these unions that if they're banning demonstrations off of campus because of this undergrad organizing, then you are threatened, because if your contract isn't going well, then what are you going to do? You have no option if you have no option to demonstrate. And so I think making that connection is really pivotal, to show that a contract is necessary, and also to get organized labor on campus on board with a contract that pertains to a investment review board, so that the students, the staff, the faculty may have a say over not just the investments and donors connected to Zionist entities, but all investments and donors. And furthermore, I think, I don't want to maybe talk necessarily about next steps in this regard, but I think I want to invite all of you to consider that in order to consolidate an American resistance that grows out of this movement for Palestinian liberation, we have to pinpoint the front lines of the way that colonialism presents itself in our country as well as it does in Palestine, and continue to draw those comparisons, because that's where as we were talking about, that's where our communities will start to make those connections. And so I invite all of you to consider that the American resistance, if it is consolidating now, must be built about challenging the existence of the police and the prison force in this country.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Yeah, go ahead, Victoria.
Speaking to first, where do we stand now with administration and school? It is very clear that Northeastern University, along with the schools of my other comrades, has a commitment to genocide. They do not care to disclose their investments, they do not care to divest, and they do not care to denounce. They made a statement on October 7th, just for the people in Israel that are affected and nothing else. So it is clear that our movement cannot start and end with just students. It is clear also that disruption, that making a scene, that making it public and making things community-oriented scares institutions and scares administrations. And I would say, moving into what's next, that is what's next. I believe, all my comrades, I believe this too, that there's a role for everybody in the movement. Every single 150 of you in the audience right now, there is a role for you too, whether that's through supplies, through jail funds, whether that's through donating or showing up or art, whatever. There is a position that everybody can take to be a part of this movement. And it's not just students, it's every single one of us. And as well, I would employ or mobilize the folks in the audience. You guys all look like lovely people. You also all look like you have salaries and retirement funds, which is awesome. I don't have that. Money talks. Money really, really talks. Don't give donations to these universities. Pull your donations, pull your annual gifts, pull your funds. Money talks. Also, talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, talk to your children, talk to your community members. Tell them what's going on in Palestine. Tell them what's going on in universities here. Talk, pull that money, etc. And overall, I just want to say that keep all eyes on Palestine. At the end of the day, what us as students have gone through is an inch of what is actually happening abroad. So remember that what matters the most is keeping eyes there as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Rhea.
Where we're at right now at UMass is that the Student Government Association has unanimously put out a statement of no confidence in our chancellor. So has the unions of our university. And what was I going to say? And so where we're at right now is everyone wants him to go. Every single cultural association on campus, except for Hillel, if you would consider that a cultural association, has put out statements in solidarity with SJP. Every single random student club has put out statements. This is a very, very important time where we need to keep pressure on our administration. So I would urge everyone here to email Chancellor Reyes at umass.edu and tell him that he needs to go. Where we're also at right now is that we are going to keep fighting for our demands, which is disclosure, divestment, dropping the charges, and also a democratized UMass in which our public university listens to its students and its faculty, where we can put out a vote of 73% of our student body who voted saying they want divestment happens, and that it's listened to. Because where we're at is we're not in a democratized university. We don't have a say in our chancellor. We don't have a say in our board of trustees. We don't have a say on this money that we are funneling to Israel. And if we did, we would not be funneling it, because more than 60, 70% are against it. So those are our demands. I think next steps is that we keep mobilizing. Some people mentioned this in many different ways, by connecting the Palestinian cause to all other causes of the world. And I've been seeing a lot of people say Gaza is going to free us all. And I truly believe that. People are becoming radicalized in many different ways. They're understanding that the struggle for Palestinian liberation is the struggle against cops. It's the struggle for Black liberation and Indigenous liberation, and the liberation of Congo and Sudan, and every single country that the US is exploiting and killing. And I also would urge everyone here, I think a lot of people here are probably Democrats, to not vote for Joe Biden. Do not vote. This genocide is happening under his administration. It is not happening under the Republicans. The Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. I would urge people to look into third-party candidates so that we can abolish this two-party system that people think we need to live under, and so that we can build a better world for ourselves. Because the reason universities are acting this way is because of Joe Biden and because of the Biden administration putting out statements saying that these protests are anti-Semitic and that these protests are dangerous and need to be stopped. It all goes back to him. And this war is being waged under his name, and under the Democrats. And so I would really, really urge the people here, especially the older folks, to join third-party campaigns and to start helping this country, get free from the shackles of the two-party system that is aiding in this genocide and that is killing its own people. Do you have anything to add?
Also, out of the 140-ish people that were arrested, in our case, I don't know if we just have wonderful legal support, but the DA is actually considering dropping a lot of the charges, or most of them, for lack of evidence. And we are actually going to be countersuing the police department and the state police that did this to us. That's a secret.
Thank you. If no one has anything else to, yep, go ahead. Either one of you.
Oh, wait, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I remembered the thing. It was exactly, Maria, what you just said. Like, we were having one teach-in, and a professor of ours asked are we liberating Palestine, or is Palestine liberating us? And watching people build those connections, and even just me personally, the things that I was aware of, and the systems and the oppression that I was aware of, that was always there. But to be so much more confronted with it and work through everything is really something notable. Yeah, and also the thing about what really scares the colleges is the community engagement, because they rely on the fact that it's just students that they're going to have for 4 years, and it's a revolving door. So building that consciousness is the most important part, because that people won't leave. That's not a trend.
Definitely. Go ahead, Dahlia.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that phrase, we are all Palestinians, it's true in a sense, in the way that in order to free the Palestinians, we kind of have to really empathize and live like that, which involves a lot of we need to, I think, and what's especially important for older people in the audience is it's going to be very important that we all get very uncomfortable. Like, even the younger people, like we have to get very, very uncomfortable in the things that we've been taught, like not just taking the watered down version. We have to fight for full liberation for all people, no matter what. Like anything less than equal rights for all of that doesn't go. And I think that involves a lot of educating yourself, not just YouTube videos, like also books. Our education should involve a lot of POC voices, or what people that we have never heard. If you're just reading Marx, God bless your heart, but like he's a white man. Other things I've thought about, like disruption can also come in like smaller ways, especially if you're older. Like, you know, maybe you don't have the ability to like go and be in an encampment, but like it means when someone asks you how you're doing, you're honest and you're like, this is at the top of my mind, even if it's like something like disrupt normal social situations. Their comfort doesn't matter. It literally is not worth, you can't pit it against what's happening right now. That, and then I had one more thing. It's also a lot about like caring about your community and taking what we learned from the encampment into real life. A lot of like community, living with others, caring about not just Palestine, like start looking at the Congo or Sudan, or even like when it comes to the encampment, I don't think we talked enough about like unhoused people and how there's a lot of similarities between, you know, police coming and messing up their camps, but we just don't really talk about it a lot. And like, for example, I was really, really touched and heartwarmed by how, you know, many resources were sent our way when we started our encampment, especially the second time. But I couldn't help but think, like, we need to be sending this energy everywhere. Like when we see homeless people, we need to be sending it to their camps, because Tufts, as an example, is a very privileged school. Like we had a lot of overflow of things like blankets and stuff like that. And we need to be, I don't know, thinking about really like, how do we operationalize and, I don't know, make the most out of our actions.
Yeah, go ahead, Patricio.
Yeah, I think I just want kind of one last thing about what all of my comrades have been saying, which is that decolonization work and liberation kind of begins at a very intimate level. As students, we all have a lot to deconstruct and to learn on a personal level. And that requires a great degree of discomfort. And I think that's required of everyone who is benefiting from empire in any way, who is living in these systems in any way. I do want to emphasize that discomfort cannot just be a felt thing. It cannot just be an idea we grapple with. It has to be a feature in which we position our very bodies. It has to be something that we embody. Liberation has to be something that we embody. And I think where we're standing now with regards to these encampments makes that all very important, because more mobilization, more escalation is more education. All of these events are profoundly consciousness raising. And I think that all of our administrations and all of the leaders, all of the elites of these systems are very, very scared. And I think I just remember from Northeastern that the whole weekend after the arrests, every green space on campus was blocked off with metal barricades. They were horrified, they were terrified of the commons. And until very recently, private security were surrounding all of these common spaces because they were afraid. And I think across the country, administrators are afraid, and across the world, administrators are afraid of this boiling over into the summer in the way that it has in the past. And I think that is something that should be very hopeful on one end, but primarily an urgent call to action for all of us to engage in liberation work, to place ourselves in discomfort, and to work for this, to really put something on the line for liberation.
Thank you so much. I mean, everything that you guys have said, I mean, I'm already learning a lot. I don't know nearly enough. But I think, you know, learning from all of you, that's maybe the first step. And hopefully the audience, you know, learning new things is the first step to achieving liberation. Not, again, as all of you said, not only for Palestine, but you know, for all of us. Quickly, I want to advertise before we ask the last question of the webinar, because we technically do have 8 minutes left. One of our volunteers in MAPPA has planned a solemn vigil at the Harvard commencement. That is going to be happening on Thursday, May 23rd, starting at 7:45 a.m. And is gathering in front of the main Harvard Red Line entrance, really just to you know, show support for the students at the encampment, but also, as we've all been saying, to shine light on what's going on in Palestine and to not let our administrators and people showing up at these commitments forget about what's happening or not pay attention to it. And also, as Ruya said, email the presidents and the chancellors of these universities. I think we will send out an email afterwards thanking you all for coming, but also sending out these action items. Email Chancellor Reyes, email President Ayoun at Northeastern. I don't know the rest of the names of the chancellors or presidents of the other universities, but all that information is public and you can access it. With that said, I would love to bring Mary on for a last question to ask the students, if you're okay with that, Mary.
Sure, I'd be delighted to, in fact. And also, I want to invite just the students to stay on for a little while afterwards so that you have a chance to just talk to each other, if you'd like. Sorry, everybody else, but this will be for the students. So I'm also inspired for you, and I actually have been living with the question of Palestine all my entire life, and still I have learned so much from all of you through all of the protests and the encampments, and also this evening especially. But that leads me to, I think, a really important question for all of us who are listening in. What is it that we can do individually and as organizations? And before that, I want to say, because it's been in the Signal chat out here in Western Mass, if you're in Western Mass or anywhere near it, please go starting tomorrow and all this week to support the students, faculty, and community members at their arraignments in Belchertown, the Belchertown Court, 205 State Street. But then what is it that we could do who are listening to you as organizations, as individuals? What do you need from us?
Go for it, Dylan.
Well, one thing that definitely I think we really need from communities like y'all's is we're students, where a lot of people are new organizers, as we've talked about. We need the knowledge of previous generations. We need to be connected to the strategies and the tactics that took other generations to the places that they were able to go. And that's something that I think is super necessary. And like what you were saying, just being there to support, whether it's a jail support, court support, I think is so valuable to put pressure on these institutions that are taking our autonomy. And as Victoria mentioned, I also think money talks. And so being conscious with where you're putting your money and where you're taking out your money, and where public pressure is as well. Like, I think now if you pull out your money from these universities, it means a lot more for the cause of Palestinian liberation than it might have like 6 months ago, for example.
Go ahead, Rayon. Sorry.
It's super quick. Just adding to that also, like, as organizations, like, who are you spotlighting? Who are you promoting? Who are you amplifying? What voices are you centering? And like making sure it's really like in tune with what you're trying to put forth, whether that's, for Palestine or for the students, making sure that everything is really connected and in tandem with the work that student SJPs or other student organizers or really any like liberation movement is doing, and centering those voices. And yeah, everyone's saying, like, money talks, and understanding where it's coming from, where it's going, who do you have ties to, who has a say, really just understanding the structure of everything. Yeah.
Sorry. Go for it.
I think a lot of people here are Western Mass folks, and this is our last week. So we have some things planned that haven't been announced yet. But I would say keep your eye on UMass and please come to the things we have planned. Wednesday is Nekba Day, and we're going to have a vigil on South Lawn, which is where our encampment was, and we're going to have an art build and a whole thing for the martyrs. And we would love for you to come. This is not a movement for the students. This is a movement for everyone. I would also emphasize that I think it is very important right now, specifically to read books, like read The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, read any Norman Finkelstein book, read whatever you can, read Ilan Pape, read books on Palestine, because it's impossible to do this work without having a background of the history that way precedes October 7th. I think a lot of people became mobilized after October 7th, but this is ongoing. This is since before 1948. And so I would really, really urge everyone to please read. And I don't know, maybe start a book club, read with people around you, make it a community thing where you guys can learn together, talk to people around you. Mobilize people, tell people to come with you when you go to these events. Urge your grandsons, your granddaughters, whoever it is, urge them to do something. Don't just do this in your free time. I would emphasize that this needs to be on the front line of everything that you do. And a very easy thing to do is to implement BDS in your daily life. Don't buy Sabra Hummus, like don't buy Puma, don't buy HP, do not use Caterpillar if you need home renovations. Just go on the BDS list and look at everything we're boycotting and try your best to boycott. And when you do that, you can also start aiding into local businesses. And yeah.
I think smaller scale also, this is really demoralizing work, and it gets really difficult. So bring your love wherever you can. If you care enough to be here today, it means you are a good person. It means you care about the students. It means you care about the movement. So just to bring yourself and your love and your energy is doing so much in itself. I mean, anytime I see a person that attends one of our protests or comes to support us who's over the age of 60, it just breaks my heart into a million pieces. Like, having the support of older generations is so important. And it can get really lonely for students to feel like they're on their own in all of this with our no resources, our no jobs, our loans. So to just be there whenever you can in person, to put your body there and to just exist with students who are going through these awful things, means so much.
I think I just want to say, on behalf of me, on behalf of Mary, and on behalf of, I think, the 130 people we have in the audience, thank you so much for coming. You all are amazing, and I'm lucky enough to have talked to you, but also learned something from you too. So again, if you want to stay on and talk, feel free. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who registered for this event and who's stayed on and who's listened to these students' voices. It's so important. So thank you and have a great night.
Before we go, so that's just for the students to stay on. But I also want to say that Jennifer Scarlett, who is from Smith, has joined just at the very last moment. And I really want to acknowledge Smith. They actually had an occupation starting March 27th that went on for 2 weeks, and they have not stopped. They really have not. And I hope, Jennifer, that you'll stay on to talk with the students.
I just want to say,
Grace, have the last word, Grace.
Well, no, go ahead, Victoria. I don't need to have the last word.
Well, it doesn't need the last word either, but I was just gonna say it's very empowering, inspiring that so many folks showed up today. It's really nice to be in community with different generations. Like in colleges, we're really sheltered sometimes with just other college students, and like it means a lot to see every single one of your faces, and for you guys to be here and just listen to us, because often we don't listen to each other. So thank you for having us, and thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Unfortunately, I don't have a button to say kick everyone else out but the students, but I think we'll figure it out.
Yep, all good. Thank you, Glenn. Okay.
Glenn, did you find Jennifer and highlight her, pin her?
Hey, everybody. Miriam, thank you for that. That's very kind. I'm actually not affiliated with Smith. So I'll bow out in a second because I feel I shouldn't be here for
Well, you could have fooled me.
Discussion. Yeah, I'm a Northampton resident who's a member of Demilitarize Western Mass, Northampton Abolition Now, etc. And I was one of the 139 arrested at